What goes on? What is sin? Today the word sin has almost become a taboo word, which is not even used in our church circles. And the reason why it is less used is because people don't quite understand what sin is. Sin is very central to the gospel message. If we don't understand what sin is, then we cannot really understand what Jesus came to save us from. You see, we all sin, whether we think we do or not, but the great news is that Jesus came to save those who sin. He came to save and set us free from the power that sin has over our lives. The Bible says that if we say that we have no sin, then we are only deceiving ourselves. But the good news again is that no matter what our sin is, if we confess our sin and turn away from it, God is faithful to forgive us, and His love will save us. The Catechism of the Catholic Church defines sin as an offense against reason, an offense against truth and conscience. We sin when we choose our wants over genuine love of God, love of others, and our true value and worth.
I'll leave you now to settle in and enjoy the service. I'll catch you.
You see, God created us in His image and after His likeness. He created us intrinsically good. Everything within us is good, but we can use what God has given us for good or for evil. We sin when we go against that eternal law written in our hearts, written in our conscience. And when we choose not to respect and love ourselves, when we choose to put ourselves before others, and when we don't respond to this amazing love of God. For example, we sin against ourselves when we don't recognize our dignity, we don't recognize our value, we don't recognize the potential we have in being in the image and after the likeness of God. We sin against others when we fail to treat them with genuine love, when we put ourselves and our attachment to things before them. For example, gossip, or stealing, or a lack of generosity, or not sharing our time, our goods, and even not sharing our faith in God. All sin is ultimately sin against God, but we sin directly against God when we decide to reject God's love and put ourselves before God. All sin is turning our back towards perfect love, but we can sin in different ways, and different sins, as you can imagine, carry different consequences. For example, if I murdered someone in cold blood, it would have a different consequence with God, with my soul, and also with the law, than if I stole some food coloring from a supermarket. Both are wrong, but the former carries a greater consequence than the latter. The Catechism of the Catholic Church talks about venial sin and mortal sin. What are those?
What are those?
Mortal sin is the more serious of the two. There's mortal sin and venial sin. Now, when we fall into mortal sin, we are directly rejecting God. We're turning our back against God. We're wounding charity in a serious way. While on the other hand, venial sin is not necessarily turning our back towards God in a serious way, but we do wound charity. But we can always ask God for His mercy and His forgiveness, and know and trust that He will forgive us. For a sin to be a mortal sin, it requires three things. The first is that it needs to be grave matter. That is, you are breaking basically one of the 10 commandments. The second thing is that you need to be aware that you are breaking these commandments, that you are committing this serious sin. And then the third thing is that you have the freedom to do it. Nobody is forcing you to commit this sin. If you are not aware it is a sin, it is still a sin, but the consequence is less. And when we do fall into mortal sin, we need to go to the sacrament of reconciliation, to be reconciled with God and with the believing community. There is nothing more important than our relationship with God, and keeping that relationship intact should be our priority. Now, I know that all of this might sound systematic, it might sound legalistic, but at the end of the day, always keep in mind that ultimately it is about falling in love with Jesus, maintaining this relationship with God, loving God and letting God love us. Always know that God is a God of mercy, and never ever get tired of asking His forgiveness, because He's always ready to forgive us. He will never tire of forgiving us. It's only we who get tired of asking for forgiveness.